Before the fame and fortune, Richard Branson was just a teenager chasing a dream with a magazine in hand. No college degree, no business guide, just boldness and hustle. He took chances most wouldn't dare, and now he's the man behind a global empire, a private island, and even his own space company. This is the story of how it all happened. Richard Branson didn't start Virgin from a boardroom or tech lab. He started it from a small flat in London, selling records by mail. It was 1970 and Branson, then just 20, saw a gap. Records were expensive in stores, and people were willing to wait a bit longer if it meant saving money. That tiny business grew quickly into Virgin Records, which would go on to sign acts that other labels wouldn't touch. When Branson took a chance on the Sex Pistols, a band banned on mainstream radio, he wasn't just being rebellious. He recognized that controversy could sell, and it did. Virgin's roster expanded with artists like Culture Club and Phil Collins, helping push the label into the big leagues. But music wasn't where he stopped. Branson's real talent was brand extension. He launched Virgin Atlantic in 1984 with one plane and a lot of press stunts, including dressing up as a flight attendant. It was a move that didn't just grab headlines. It changed the dominance of British Airways, which led to a years-long rivalry and even a lawsuit. That same mindset followed with Virgin Mobile, which aimed to simplify phone plans, and Virgin Galactic, where Branson gambled on commercial space travel becoming more than science fiction. Every move wasn't a hit. Virgin Cola flopped, but Branson kept swinging. The common thread was always the same: take a recognizable brand and push it into places where the customer experience could be better. Virgin wasn't built overnight, and it definitely wasn't built by playing it safe. It grew because Branson kept looking for what was missing, then filled the gap with something bold, usually with his name on it. When Richard Branson bought Necker Islands in 1979, it was just a patch of land in the British Virgin Islands. No roads, no buildings, nothing but palm trees and sand. He was only 28 and reportedly offered $180,000, a fraction of the asking price. At the time, he didn't have a real plan for it. He later admitted he only pursued the purchase to impress a woman he was dating, Joan Templeman, who later became his wife. Over the decades, that impulse buy turned into one of the most famous private getaways in the world. Branson transformed the 74-acre island into a full-blown luxury retreat. The main house, built in Balinese style, is surrounded by infinity pools, private villas, tennis courts, and beach pavilions. The place runs on solar and wind power, a decision Branson made to push toward his sustainability goals, not just to cut costs, but because he wants to prove you can live luxuriously without wasting resources. On sunny days, Necker runs on 100% renewable energy. There is even a wildlife sanctuary on the island, home to endangered species like lemurs, flamingos, and giant tortoise, many of which were brought in under conservation efforts led by Branson and his team. The island isn't just for his personal use. Branson rents it out to private groups, weddings, and corporate retreats, with rates reaching up to $100,000 per night. Still, he reserves it for family gatherings and high-profile guests. Over the years, people like Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, and Princess Diana have visited. There is even a photo of Obama kite-surfing with Branson just weeks after leaving office, proof that even former presidents can't resist the place. Necker isn't just a luxury asset, it's a personal statement. It reflects how Branson lives, off the grid when he wants to be, but still fully connected to the world when it matters. It's not about showing off wealth, it's about creating a world he don't have to escape from. Branson's ventures extended beyond Earth. Richard Branson has always chased ideas that feel just out of reach, and Virgin Galactic might be the clearest example of that. He launched the company in 2004, not as a science project, but as a business with a clear goal: make space accessible to regular people. Well, at least to those who could afford the ticket. At the time, the idea sounded like a billionaire's fantasy, but Branson didn't treat it like a joke. He poured money into it, hired serious engineers, and made sure the company had a real shot at flying. It wasn't a smooth ride. The 2014 crash of the VSS Enterprise during a test flight was a gut punch. One pilot was killed, and the project stalled for years. Most people would have walked away, written it off as too risky. But Branson stuck with it, publicly and privately. He didn't just keep funding the company, he kept showing up. When the next generation spacecraft, VSS Unity, finally launched a successful flight in 2018, it was a small but important win. Then came July 2021. Branson boarded VSS Unity and flew to the edge of space, reaching about 53 miles above Earth. It wasn't the moon, but it didn't have to be. He was one of the first civilians to make the trip and the first founder of a private space company to ride his own vehicle up. The flight only lasted a few minutes, but it proved something to investors, to future customers, and maybe most of all to Branson himself, that the vision wasn't impossible. Virgin Galactic tickets now go for around $450,000, and there is a waitlist. The company still faces financial pressure and logistical setbacks, but Branson continues to back it, not just because it might be profitable, but because to him, going to space is something people should want to do, and he wants to be the one who makes it happen. Richard Branson doesn't sit still for long, and that's not just a personality quirk. It's a pattern that's shaped his life. Whether he's crossing the Atlantic in a hot air balloon or testing the limits of submarines, Branson has always been drawn to motion. In the late 80s and early 90s, he set out to break speed records across oceans by boat and balloon. Some of the trips failed. Others landed him in the record books, but none of them felt like stunts. He's genuinely obsessed with seeing how far he can push things, not just in business but in real life. That same energy shows up in the way he lives. He owns a Dassault Falcon 900EX, a sleek private jet with enough range to get from London to Los Angeles non-stop. It's not just a tool for convenience. He's used it to fly across continents for meetings, family trips, and the occasional spontaneous getaway. When you've built companies across dozens of countries, being able to take off on your schedule makes a difference. Branson also owns a place in Mosquito Island, not far from Necker, where the focus is sustainability wrapped in comfort. Solar panels, wind turbines, and smart water systems run quietly in the background while guests lounge in open-air villas with ocean views. It's luxury but not wasteful. That balance is important to him. He doesn't try to hide the lifestyle he's earned. He just lives it. From kite surfing with former President Barack Obama to hosting guests like Kate Winslet, his version of luxury isn't about velvet ropes or exclusivity. It's about freedom. If he wants to swim in the ocean, he walks out the door. If he wants to take a jet halfway around the world, he doesn't need permission. But Branson's lifestyle has never just been about personal indulgence. He has always made room for causes and projects that stretch beyond himself. It's part of how he sees success, not as a finish line, but as something to carry forward. Beyond personal indulgence, Branson invests in making a difference. Richard Branson has always run his businesses with personality, but when it came to philanthropy, he doesn't just write checks and pose for photos. In 2004, he launched Virgin Unite, the non-profit side of the Virgin Group. The idea wasn't to start another generic charity. He wanted it to operate like a startup, lean, fast, and focused on long-term change instead of short-term applause. Virgin Unite supports causes across health, climate, and social justice, but it also helps build systems that empower others to lead. That's how the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship came to life. First in South Africa, then expanding into other parts of the Caribbean. It's not about giving away money, it's about giving people a shot at building something of their own. Branson's also played a behind-the-scenes role in more global issues. He was one of the early founders of the Elders, a group of independent leaders founded by Nelson Mandela. The Elders includes figures like Mary Robinson and Ban Ki-moon, who work on conflict resolution, gender equality, and climate justice. Branson doesn't speak for the group, and he's not on the front lines with them, but his support helped launch and sustain it. It's one of those things that doesn't carry the Virgin logo, yet it aligns with how he sees power, something to be used, not hoarded. In recent years, he's spoken out on drug policy reform, criminal justice issues, and climate action, often going against the grain of business as usual thinking. Even when Virgin's bottom line might take a hit, he's been vocal about putting people and the planet first. That's not always popular with shareholders, but Branson tends to bet on the long game. He's not perfect. Some have questioned how his businesses are structured or taxed. But the impact of what he has helped build through Virgin Unite and beyond is real. It's not branding. It's baked into how he operates. He sees business and activism not as separate worlds, but as things that work better when they're tied together. Richard Branson doesn't fit the typical billionaire mold, especially when you line him up next to names like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg, where most of them rose through software, data, or logistics. Branson came up through music and travel. Virgin started as a record store, then a label, then somehow turned into an airline. That's not a playbook you see in business schools, but that's kind of the point. Branson never followed one. His approach has always been more about the feeling behind the brand than the tech driving it. Virgin Atlantic, for example, didn't revolutionize airplanes. What it did offer was an experience. Mood lighting, onboard bars, a cheeky personality that felt human in a way other airlines didn't. That same attitude shows up in Virgin Hotels and even in Virgin Galactic. For Branson, it's not just about delivering a product, it's about how the product makes you feel. That's what built loyalty. Contrast with Jeff Bezos, whose entire empire at Amazon is based on scale, speed, and optimization, or Elon Musk, who inserts himself as the face of Tesla and SpaceX and often overshadows the products with his presence. Branson keeps things personal, but not overwhelming. He's the face of Virgin, but he's not trying to dominate every headline or control every conversation on social media. His leadership style leans more toward energy and visibility, not micromanagement. Even his portfolio looks different. Instead of concentrating on one industry, he spread Virgin across everything from telecom and rail to space, tourism, and healthcare. Some bets failed, like Virgin Cola, but Branson didn't slow down. His brand is about trying things, taking risks, and keeping the tone light, even when the stakes are high. You won't find Branson on Twitter throwing punches or arguing with critics. You'll find him kite surfing, launching new ventures, or popping up in places most billionaires wouldn't think to be. It's not that he avoids pressure, it's that he seems to move through it with a kind of ease that makes everything feel slightly more fun. Branson's legacy continues to evolve. Richard Branson doesn't act like a typical billionaire, and that's by design. He has spent his entire career challenging norms, first in music, then in aviation, and now in causes that go well beyond profit margins. His legacy at this point is about more than business. It's about how he's chosen to use the resources and attention that came with his success. Branson has made environmental advocacy a priority in both his business operations and personal efforts, long before it became trendy for corporations to talk about sustainability. He was launching Virgin Fuels in 2006, putting money into biofuels and other renewable energy options. It wasn't a silver bullet, and not every project worked, but the intention was clear. Business should try to clean up after itself. He's also been active in climate talks and helped form the B Team, a group of global leaders advocating for a more responsible model of capitalism. The idea behind it isn't radical. It's just the belief that companies can do well and still care about the people and places they affect. Through Virgin Unite, Branson backs efforts to reduce global inequality and support grassroots solutions. He's funded small health clinics, education projects, and justice reform initiatives. It's not always front-page news, but that's partly the point. He often backs local leaders doing the real work rather than putting his face on everything. In 2020, during the early months of the pandemic, he faced criticism for seeking government support for Virgin Atlantic. It didn't sit well with everyone, especially since Branson lives in the British Virgin Islands, a known tax haven. But alongside that controversy, he also donated hotel rooms to health workers and pledged support for pandemic-related relief through his philanthropic arm. He's not flawless, but few people operating at his level are. Looking ahead, Branson hasn't stepped away from business, but he's clearly passed the baton in some areas. Virgin companies now run across dozens of sectors, from healthcare to hotels, and he doesn't micromanage them. What he does do is focus on the bigger picture: space, sustainability, and systems that last. His interest in Virgin Galactic isn't about personal ego anymore. It's about setting a foundation for the next generation of space tourism, science, and transport. Branson's also been vocal about prison reform, drug decriminalization, and mental health, subjects many corporate leaders steer clear of. He uses his blog, media appearances, and public speaking to push these issues into conversations that usually ignore them. He's called out harsh sentencing laws and has repeatedly argued that treating addiction as a crime doesn't solve anything. He has supported research and non-profit work around this, and not because it helps Virgin's bottom line, but because, in his words, it's just the right thing to do. Unlike a lot of billionaires who build their brands around exclusivity, Branson has always leaned toward inclusion. He doesn't present himself as untouchable. He still shows up in sneakers, cracks jokes, and answers questions directly. It's part of what's kept the Virgin brand from fading, even as its founder steps further back from daily operations. He doesn't chase the same kind of spotlight he did in the 80s or 90s, but when he speaks up, it usually lands with more weight. There is a history behind it. Legacy for Branson isn't something he talks about in lofty terms. He builds it by showing up, on the ground, in meetings, and at the center of big risks. His approach hasn't always worked, and he's taken losses along the way. But the thing that sets him apart isn't just how many companies he's started or how much money he's made. It's how consistently he's tried to attach meaning to the wins. In the end, he's shaped a version of success that doesn't just sit in the bank accounts or exist in market share. It shows up in who he's supported, what he's funded, and the causes he's been willing to stand behind, even when they don't benefit him directly. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't need a logo to last. What do you think about Richard Branson's approach to business and life? Leave your thoughts in the comments.